Hi, and welcome to Kensington Online. My name is Greg. We are so glad that you are joining us today. We have a great service in store for you. We've got Ryan and Carrie are going to lead us in some incredible music. And we have Joe Leal and some video messages from our campuses down in Metro Detroit. So it really will be an amazing day. We are gathering together here today, and we just want to say thanks again for sharing and liking our content online. You really are an integral part of how we share our message of love and hope and forgiveness and restoration really across the world. Well, we are just about to get started here. We have a great opener, and this is week 1 of a new series that we're calling Defining Moments. So get ready. It's going to be a great one.
It's like the walls are caving in. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but I just can't. It isn't in my blood. Laying on the bathroom floor, feeling nothing. Overwhelmed and insecure, give me something I could take to ease my mind slowly. Just have a drink and you'll feel better. Just take her home and you'll feel better. Keep telling me that it gets better, but does it ever hurt? So help me. It's like the walls are caving in. Sometimes I feel like giving up. No medicine is strong enough. Someone help me. I'm crawling in my skin. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but I just can't. It isn't in my blood. It isn't in my blood. Looking through my phone again, feeling anxious, afraid to be alone again. I hate this, trying to find a way to chill. I can't breathe, no. Is there somebody who can help me? It's like the walls are caving in. Sometimes I feel like giving up. No medicine is good enough. Someone help me. I'm crawling in my skin. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but I just can't. It isn't in my blood. It isn't in my blood. I need somebody now. I need somebody now. Someone to help me out. Yes, I need somebody now. Help me. It's like the walls are caving in. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but I just can't. It isn't in my blood. It isn't in my blood. I need somebody now. It isn't in my blood. I need somebody now. Yes, I need somebody now. It isn't in my blood.
Yeah, let's give it up one more time for the band here. Great job. Well, my name is Greg. We are so glad that you are here with us today at Kensington Traverse City. We have a great service planned for you. And that song, a Shawn Mendes song, you've probably heard it on the radio. We love it around here because it talks about that feeling of wanting to give up but pushing through. And that theme really takes us into what we're talking about in this next series that today is the day we're kicking off, our new series called Defining Moments. We all have those moments in our lives that we can look back that define who we are. And so get ready for that. It will be a great day. And hey, I want to welcome you. If it is your first time with us, we are so glad that you are here. We have an environment just for you. It's actually in the lobby when you exit the doors after the service called Starting Point, where we've got people there who would love to shake your hand, get to know you a little bit, get to answer any questions that you have about who we are and what we do here. We also have an option online if you would love to check us out that way first. You can go to startingpoint.today and find out more about who we are. So I'd love to get a couple things on your radar. If you pull out your program that you were given as you walked in the door, the first thing is Spring Hill Day Camps is coming up in June. We've been talking about this a little while, but it is coming up, and we want all the kids, all your kids and grandkids to come to this awesome week. It really is set up to be the greatest week of your kids' summer. Many of us know and are familiar with Spring Hill and their camp that they have in Michigan, but they bring all the fun from downstate into our campus right here, from climbing wall to zip line to bungee cords, all of that. It is really amazing. And so we'd love for your kids to get sign up. You can find out more information if you go to Spring Hill's website, or if you can check us out at Starting Point or the info table back there. Also, if you have kids, you can find out more in the kids' hallway. The second thing is we have a render service coming up this Wednesday. How many have been to a render service yet? So many of us, and so many of us even that's a new experience for us. But what we call render is really a time of community and gathering together for an extended time of worship through song. We get to hear a message from Patrick. He loves to dive in deep with us there. So it really is an amazing time. If you haven't been to a render service, I encourage you to come this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Well, at this time, I'd love for you guys to stand up and give a high five and a handshake to those around you and ask them this question: Yanni or Laurel?
Hey everybody, this is Patrick, and I just wanted to say thanks again for watching our service today online and being a part of this community. Now, we know that you might have some questions as you watch the service today and want to find out a little bit more information about who we are. And so we've created an environment for you to do just that. Simply go to startingpoint.today. That's startingpoint.today, and fill out that short form, and one of our staff members will reach out to you very shortly and answer any questions that you have about our church and about who we are. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back at the end of the service today to give you a little bit more information, but we'll see you here in just a few minutes.
Well, good morning, everybody. How are we doing? We doing good? My name is Ryan. For those of you that might not know me, I'm the worship arts director here, and things look a little bit different on stage today. We're stripping it down, and just wanted to kind of set up this next song we're going to do. It's called Lion and the Lamb. And at first glance, when you look at the lyrics, it can kind of be a little bit confusing. But for our singing purposes today, I just wanted to just kind of explain it. Really, this song talks about two aspects of God. And the first aspect, God as a lion, where he's strong and powerful. And so when we sing this song, I would just encourage you, man, if that's something that you struggle with, man, giving God control and power over your life, I just want to encourage you, let that lyric be a guiding point as you sing. And then the second aspect is God as a lamb. And the gentleness of God, the meekness of God, the compassion of God, if that's something, man, you have a hard time connecting with, I just want to encourage you, let that be a guiding point, a guiding lyric as we sing this together. You guys ready? All right, let's sing this together. Sing, he's coming. He's coming on the clouds. Kings and kingdoms will bow down. And every chain will break. His broken hearts declare His praise. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Sing loud. Yes, our God is the Lion of Judah. He is roaring with power and fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before Him. Sing our God. Yes, our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, every knee will bow before Him. Oh. So open up the gates, make way before the King of Kings. Sing our God who's come to save is here to set the captives free. Come on. So who can stop the Lord Almighty? Oh, we sing that our God is the Lion. Come on. The Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before Him, our God. 'Cause our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. And every knee will bow before Him. All right, let's sing this together as a family. Come on. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? There is no one. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Come on, from the front to the back, sing it. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Oh, we lift our voice. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? There is no one who can stop the Lord Almighty. Oh, we declare, who can stop the Lord? Yeah. All right, sing it out, come on. 'Cause our God is the Lion of Judah. He is roaring with power and fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before Him, our God. 'Cause our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. And every knee will bow before Him.
If love endured that ancient cross, how precious is my Savior's blood. The beauty of heaven wrapped in my shame, age of love upon death's frame. If having my heart was worth the pain, what joy could you see beyond the grave? If love found my soul worth dying for, how wonderful, how glorious, my Savior's scars, victorious, my chains are gone, my debt is paid, from death to life and grace to grace. If heaven now owns that vacant tomb, how great is the hope that lives in you. The passion that tore through hell like a rose, the promise, the road back death and its stone. If freedom is worth the life you raised, where is my sin? Where is my shame? Oh, Jesus, if love paid it all to have my heart, how wonderful, how glorious, my Savior's scars, victorious, my chains are gone, my debt is paid, from death to life and grace to grace. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I'll see Jesus. And from death to life, I will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I'll see Jesus. And from death to life, I will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. How my soul will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. How my soul will sing your praise. How wonderful, how glorious, my Savior's scars, He's victorious, my chains are gone, my debt is paid, from death to life and grace to grace.
You know, if you grew up a church person like I did, I grew up in church all my life. I was always around crosses growing up, right? Like at our home, we had like crosses like that were, you know, on the wall. We had decor in every church that I was a part of, yeah, and they were kind of everywhere. And it's interesting when you hear a song like this, or when we teach out of the New Testament and we see what Jesus actually endured on our behalf, you begin to realize that the cross isn't just a decorative thing, and it's not just something that, you know, we kind of put up, and it's not something to take lightly. The cross was a torture device in the ancient Roman world. And we believe that the Savior of the world allowed himself to be put on a cross to die on our behalf. And at that moment when he died, People who were part of this thought that the story was over. But the movement that was happening at that time had been crushed, and it was done. But what we believe with all of our heart is that Jesus didn't just die on a cross. And the beauty of this song, the beauty of what we believe about you, the beauty that we believe about the world, is that because Jesus not only died, but he rose from the grave, then what happened is that we have the opportunity to be made right with God. And even though the cross is sometimes viewed as, a beautiful, celebratory thing, my hope for us is that every time we sing songs like this, every time we talk about it, every time we think about the cross, we recognize the brokenness that was, but then the freedom that comes with the resurrection. And that's why we are empowered to celebrate what we celebrate. So thank you so much for singing with us. You can go ahead and have a seat. Thanks so much for being here. And if it's your first time, again, let me just say welcome. My name is Patrick. I'm the lead pastor here. And in case you don't know, I don't ever get to do this. I'm going to embarrass the mess out of you real quick. This is Bryce Bell. Everybody say, hey, Bryce. Yeah. Actually, come here real quick. He's my brother-in-law, so he's going to kill me after this. And he can. I think it's obvious that Bryce can beat me up. I don't get to do this a lot. Bryce is our music director here, and we hired him. We actually were talking in our kitchen table before we moved up here, and he was at another church, and he was actually serving at his dad's church, like a smaller church in Ohio. But we won't talk about Ohio. We'll get past that. No, but you may or may not know is Bryce leads our music. He's our music director. He oversees everything here, and Bryce is so talented, right? So Bryce graduated out of, Chicago? Wheaton, yeah, Wheaton. And then after that, he moved to Nashville, and he was a recording artist there. He actually probably played on songs that you heard if you grew up in church, or like CCM in the 90s. And then he went on tour, like world tours. He's played in stadiums. My favorite story is, I'll tell this real quick, and then I'll be done, especially because I have a time limit, and it's yelling at me. Sorry. But I'll say this. He's amazing. He's also won a Grammy. So how often do you get to hear guys that played a Grammy? How cool is that? And that's fun. Yeah, so you're so much cooler than me. That's really the end of this story. But I wanted you to meet him. A lot of you don't know. You kind of see him up here. He's the most unassuming guy you'll probably ever meet, but one of the most talented. So one more time, give it up for Bryce. Thanks so much for leading in charge, bro. Love you, man. That was impromptu, so somebody back there is freaking out because now I'm over time. Sorry about that, but we'll keep you. We'll get back on time. Hey, a couple things I wanted to let you know about real quick is we talked about this last week, and I just wanted to say thank you. Clinton Township launched their building last week. We were super excited about that. That was really made possible because people just like you have given. They've been meeting in a school for about 9 years, set up and tear down, which has been incredible. And they launched in their building, and so we're actually next week going to get to show you a video of their launch, and it'll be an amazing thing. But our video that we made, how many of you were here last week? You were part of that video? Yeah, it was fun. Some of you, I went back and looked at it. You were way too excited, people. That was like people jumping up and down. No, I'm just kidding. It was great. So we put that online. There's like 1,000 views on that video, and all of Clinton Township people saw it. They were sharing it. And so I just want to say thanks so much for celebrating with us on that. So I want to go invite our ushers to move forward. We're going to receive our offering. And again, it's your first time. We get it. As soon as you walk in the door, one of the biggest perceptions of church is they just want my money. So I always say this. That's kind of true, but not fully true, right? We do believe that everybody should give. We do, if you're a part of this place, but not because the church just wants your money, because of what we do with it as an organization. And so if you're unfamiliar with our church, or you don't know, we have a couple environments where you can learn more. But one of my favorite things is we're a part of things here in the local community that we're a part of that we give to in extraordinary ways. And so we're really working to make Traverse City a better city. And then beyond that, we're able to reach a little over 500,000 people all over the world because of ordinary people like you who sacrificially give. And so things that we're involved in are things like Hope Water Project, that we're trying to bring clean water to an area of the world in Africa. We're also a part of helping young girls who are in sex trafficking be able to be pulled out of that, and not only pulled out of those environments, but then given a job so that they can succeed as they move forward. And so again, I always kind of get emotional when we talk about it. But I just want to say thank you so much for all of you who make those things happen and that you give to it. And then we've said this a couple times over the last few weeks, but a lot of you give online. In fact, the vast majority of people at our churches do give online. But if you don't currently do that, it's really the easiest way to give. You can give on the app, or you can give on the Kensington website. It takes about 30 seconds to set up, and then you don't really have to think about it too much after that. And so it's really an easy way to do it. So if you haven't done that yet, you can do it straight on your phone. Just download the app, plug in the information, and we invite you to do that. Now, the other thing I want to let you know about is we have a transition coming up that I wanted to let you know that's coming, and that involves our family ministries. And so today, I want to let you know, if you're a parent in the room, we actually structured our service, except for the Bryce moment, that you'll get out of here a little little bit earlier today, but we're circling up all of our parents just for a little bit to talk about the direction that we're heading in family ministries, and that's K-Kids, middle school, and high school. So if you can stay a few minutes after, we'd love for you to talk to you about that. But along those lines, one of the things that I wanted to let you know about is our student director. His name is Joe Leal. Joe Leal is going to be stepping off of our staff coming up at the end of the month. And so we wanted to let you know that, but not only let you know that, what I wanted to do is just in front of everybody just say to Joe, thank you so much for all that he's done. So Joe's actually going to be speaking today. You're going to get to hear from him today. And it's an incredible message. The beginning of it, I feel like you're going to be laughing really hard. I heard it in run through and I was cracking up. But I wanted to tell you just a couple things around that. With Joe stepping off our staff, we've restructured a little bit. So you're going to hear a little bit of all of that. But with Joe, he actually came up here with his wife Taylor. They've been leading our K-Kids and student ministries. Taylor is staying on in our K-Kids position, and she's doing a phenomenal job over there. And Joe has done an incredible job too. So if you're unfamiliar with what we do in student ministries, what we really want to do is create an environment that's irresistible for middle school and high school students. And so he came up here from downstate. He was actually at our Clinton Township campus, the one that just got a building, came up here and launched that. But not only did he launch what we've done in student ministries, but he also launched something that we call 18 to 29. And it actually happened out of his living room. And so if you're unfamiliar with that, this is where all the 18 to 29-year-olds, they get together. And originally it was like 3 or 4 or 5 people showing up. And then it was like 10 or 11 or 12. And then it was like 40. And it's like, how do you feed that many people? And 18 to 29-year-olds, they can eat, so how do you do that? And it's been an amazing thing. Out of that, they've been able to launch other groups out of it. And he's just done such a phenomenal job with all of those things. So you're going to get to hear from him. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. You're going to get to hear a video here in a minute that's going to set off our series. But I'm going to ask you to do this. When Joe comes out on stage, because I don't think he's out here yet. No, he's not. He's probably praying back there, which is great. That'll be great for that intro of the talk. It'll be good. But when he comes out, I'm going to ask you just to give him a big hand and thank him as a whole church for all that he's done with our student ministry. You guys up for doing that? Can you do that when he comes out? That'd be great. So to get our minds thinking along this message, we've got a defining moment, story from one of our teaching pastors downstate. His name is Andrew Kim. Andrew is new to our churches and a phenomenal speaker, phenomenal communicator. He's at our Troy campus. But you're going to get to hear a little bit of his story of brokenness and how God used that in an amazing way. So let's watch this video together.
Between the years of 1993 and 1995. And in order to understand my story during that period of time, you have to understand a little bit of my parents' story. And for my mom and my dad, they immigrated from Korea to Canada back in the 1970s in search of a better life. But it's not like their lives were bad in Korea. That wasn't it at all. Their lives were actually pretty good. My mom, she graduated first in her class from one of the best women's universities in all of Korea, and she had a great job teaching. And my dad was working at a company that's now known as LG before coming to Canada. But they gave that all up so that they could come to Canada and so that my dad could go to grad school. And to understand why they would do that, you have to understand how a lot of Koreans and really how a lot of Asians viewed the West back then, because they viewed the West as having the best jobs, the best opportunities, the best schools, the best you fill in the blank. So my dad eventually got his PhD and he got an incredible job offer. And from everything that my mom has told me about this job, it not only paid extremely well, but it had incredible benefits. And so after so many years of my family barely making ends meet, because he was a full-time student for so long, it finally looked like things were going to turn around. But right as my family was getting ready to move to the new city where my dad's new job was, he was diagnosed with stomach cancer. And at the time, I was 4 years old. And like every 4-year-old boy, I loved my father. One of the memories that I have of him is that when my sister and I, when we would get in trouble, my mom would send us into the corner. And whenever my dad would come home and he found us in the corner, he would get us out. He would break us out of jail. And every night when he would come home, my dad would go through this ritual where he would wash his hands, he would wash his face, he would wash his feet, he would basically wash off the day. And as a 4-year-old, I just wanted to be with him. And so I would do the exact same thing. But as a 4-year-old, he passed away. And that was probably one of the most difficult things that I've gone through in my life, looking back at that. So my mom's situation at the time was that she had no husband. She had 2 young children. She had very little money. And she was in a country that didn't recognize her college degree, and where she didn't know the language very well, and she didn't know the culture very well. And so you would have thought the next logical move would have been for her to take her 2 children and to move back to Korea, where my grandparents could have helped her get back on her feet, and also where she probably could have gotten a job teaching again. But that's not what she chose to do. And she knew that even if she had to give up all of her hopes and dreams, if she stayed in Canada, that my sister and I, we would receive a good education and that we would have a chance at being successful in the end. And so that's why she stayed. And my mom worked so hard to raise my sister and me. And she was a small business owner, and small is the operative word because she was the only one who worked there for more than 20 years, which meant that it didn't matter whether she was feeling amazing. It didn't matter whether she was deathly ill. She had to go to work. What that also meant was that for more than 20 years, she never got a break. She never got a vacation. And also because she didn't speak the language very well, she faced a lot of racism and prejudice as well. And for me, growing up without a dad wasn't the easiest thing to do either. And it got particularly hard when I got to high school, because in high school for 2.5 long years, I was bullied. And there were these 3 guys in high school who made my life so incredibly difficult. And I absolutely hated going to school. I dreaded going to school during that season. But one of the things that I had learned going to church as a kid was that before you go to bed, you should pray. And so I had done that for many years. And so during that season, I remember every single night turning off the lights and sitting on my bed. But before I would pray every single night, I would just break down and cry, because what I was going through was so painful, it hurt so much. And so every single night I would just sit on my bed and I would cry and I would cry and I would cry. And I would sit there and ask God the same question almost every single night. And the question that I asked God during that season of my life was, why did you have to take my dad? Because I believe that even as a kid, that if my dad had been around, that I either wouldn't have been bullied or wouldn't have gone on for 2.5 long years. Because he was my dad, and he would have either stepped in and stopped it, or he would have shown me what I was supposed to do as a man. All the years that I asked him during that season, all the years that I've asked him since then, I've never received an answer. But what I did get was something that was so much greater, so much more extraordinary than the answer to that question. Because it was during that time that I met Jesus in the most incredible, personal, and transformative way. I met Jesus in a way that I knew that he was real, that he wasn't just a person in a book. He wasn't just a person in just a bunch of lessons that people told me to believe when I went to church. But I came to understand that during that season that he was real. Because during those nights that I would ask that question, and during those times where I would sit on my bed and I would cry, that I couldn't see, but I could feel the presence of Jesus sitting next to me, feeling my pain to the very core of my being. And I remember during that season, I said to him that if you are willing to walk with me during the most difficult and darkest and most desperate times of my life, that I will follow you for the rest of my life.
Thank you. I love that story of Andrew, and kind of as we go through the weeks, you'll see different stories from different teaching pastors. And Andrew, if you've never listened to him, he's our Troy teaching pastor, and he's one of those speakers who I love to listen to just on my own, because I think he's got such a unique way of communicating, and just hearing part of his story kind of sets us up for defining moments. So that's what we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks, are defining moments. And what are defining moments? And as we kick off this series, we're going to look at either moments or pieces of not only some of our teaching pastors' lives, but our own lives, and how we can look at maybe some of the pieces and some of the things that have happened to you and in your history, and see how those can play out to the course of our life and what's going to happen. And if you're like me, you probably can remember some defining moments that have happened in your life. Maybe it was an event, a person, a place, a thing, something that happened to you that you look back and you say, that was a monumental thing. And I know for me, I actually had one of these this week. I had a moment this week where something happened, and it allowed me to have a different relationship with people around me. Like, I saw that certain people in my life thought a certain way, and I go, I don't need those people anymore. I had a conversation with my parents, who have done a great job raising me, in my opinion. But after this moment, I questioned everything. I had a new respect for my wife. And it was all because of a sound clip. You've heard this.
Laurel.
Maybe you haven't.
Laurel.
But there is something happening. It's playing right now. How many of you hear Yanni or Yanni?
Laurel.
Okay, you can go serve in the nursery because your ears don't work correctly, so crying babies won't affect you. How many of you hear Laurel? You're all the right people. Good job. You see, I just weeded out half of the people in here who I don't trust now because they heard one thing. But this was a defining moment this week in our culture, in our history. Maybe people at work and you clashed over this. It's one of the dumbest things, but everyone's got an opinion on it. And so it was a defining moment. I looked at friends around me and go, you're crazy. My mom was like, I hear Yanni, the piano player. And I'm like, no, Mom, the wrong Yanni. Wrong guy. And so it's all been weird. But if you're like me, you know that you have defining moments every single day. And defining moments have the ability to do something. They have the ability to shape and shift how we view the world. And you know that this happens. Maybe it's a moment in time, a moment in history, a moment in your life that was a big enough moment where it shaped and shifted how you saw the world around you. They have the ability to change things. And throughout our lives, maybe you can remember specific events that changed what you believe or how you viewed the world. I know in my life I've seen specific moments in time where I can remember things that changed me. And one of my earliest memories, one of the first things I actually remember, was when I was 5 years old. I remember when I was 5 years old, I won an award, which is a big deal apparently. And so I remember my parents got me all dressed up in a little tie and everything, which is uncomfortable for anybody at any age, but at 5 it's really uncomfortable. And so they got me all dressed up, and as I had to go accept this award, we practice at home to shake everybody's hand, look them in the eye. Maybe parents, you've had this conversation with your kids too. You thought you had the plan. And I remember when I got this award, instead of shaking every person's hand, I stuck my tongue out at them. And so I went, like that to every single person down the road. And so that was a defining moment when I got home with my parents. Never forget that one, all right? So that was there. And so then my life goes on, and my next moment that I really remember that changed things, and this is going to be one of the weirdest, dumb things, but I remember being 8 years old. 8 years old. My parents let me stay up way too late, and then something happened. It was a Thursday night. And I remember staying up way too late because the Detroit Red Wings were in a double overtime, Game 7 against the St. Louis Blues, and then this happened.
Well, obviously, you're going to have more of the quick changes on these lines here as we go into this second overtime. Gretzky had it, lost it. Yzerman picks it up. Yzerman moving, blue line chance.
I remember that moment right there. All of this happening, all of the chaos. It was the first time I cried at a sporting event because I was filled with so much joy. And I love sports so much that this is carried on. My wife thinks I'm a crazy person because during sporting events, I get emotional. I'm it all stems back to Steve Yzerman scoring. It is this crazy monumental thing. And then if you're like me, you have the other defining moments. You go through high school. High school is a defining moment for the worse or better. For me, it was really, really good. Another defining moment is just if you've graduated college. For me, it was an act of God that I graduated college, but I got the diploma, I pay the bills, it's real, okay? I got another defining moment was when I convinced my wife to marry me. That is a defining moment, again, another modern day miracle. Most of us can look back, if you've been married, as your wedding as a defining moment in your life, and we had the largest wedding party of all time. And then we bought a house, and these are all defining moments. And then the most recent big defining moment for me is when my little boy Jackson came into the world. And he's the cutest little baby in the world. But all of these moments in time for me, each one of those represents something that's happened that either changed or shifted how I viewed the world. And not only in our own lives, you can go through and you can run a timeline just like this in your life probably. Maybe it was when you bought the business. Maybe it was when you relocated. Maybe it was a divorce. There's all of these defining moments that can shape and shift how we view the world, and they're personal to us. They can shift how we think and how we feel. But there's also events that happen in history that may have changed our lives, whether we know it or not. Maybe some of you, your parents or you, can remember all the way back to the Civil Rights Movement. And you can remember your parents either talking or hearing about this famous speech that was given that began a change in culture and a change in race and all of these things. Maybe you remember in the 80s when the Berlin Wall fell, and you remember watching that on TV, and you remember saying, this is the fall of the Cold War. Maybe some of you try to forget, but you still remember the 90s, and you're like, that whole thing was just a defining moment for you. Don't lie, I know. And you had this moment, or I remember Y2K, where you had to stock up on water because the computers were going to die and turn off, and everyone was going to be destroyed, and so you had to go stock up. Or even after that, probably every person in here that's old enough remembers exactly where they were on the morning of September 11th. You remember how you felt. You remember the things you saw, the news reports, all of those things. You remember that. Or maybe it was when natural disasters like Katrina hits, and you see thousands of people lose everything. And maybe it's a defining moment where you realize how much you do have and how you can help. And you sit there and you have a shift. Or maybe it's when the impossible happens and the Cubs win the World Series, and you remember where you were, you remember your family, your grandparents who said it would never happen, and then it happened. You see, defining moments have the ability to shape and shift how we view our world. And we all have personal moments, and we all have moments that the whole world can affect us. And some of these moments, maybe right now you're sitting here and they're bringing back memories for specific times that you had in your life. And you're remembering how you felt, the things you were going through, and how it maybe shifted or changed how you thought about the world. They bring back those feelings. And maybe some of you, if you're being really honest, are in that moment right now. Maybe there's something happening right now in your life where you're like, I am at a crossroad. I'm at a point where I either have to make a decision, or something's happening, or something is about to happen, and I need to get my ducks in a row, or I need to be prepared to navigate this moment that I'm in right now. And you see, these moments are all around us. And sometimes we don't even see that they're there. And some of us find ourselves in those moments right now. There's a situation or circumstance, and we don't know how we can do it, and we feel challenged. That's what these moments can do. Defining moments can challenge us. They can challenge everything about us. They can challenge what we believe, how we feel, how we think. And what they can do, as I said, they can shape our views. And what they can shape our view, and they can challenge our view of ourselves. Maybe something's happening right now. You're going through a situation. Maybe it's a breakup, it's a split, where you're wondering if you are the problem, if you are good enough, if you are the person who needs to change. And your view of yourself has changed. In moments like this, not only can the view of ourselves change, but the view of our world can change. You wonder, why is this happening somewhere else? Man, I never want my kids to go through this. You see on the news another school shooting, and you go, I can't believe this continues to happen. And you go, man, what is this world? These moments change our view of not only ourselves, not only our world, but if we get to the place where it can allow us to change our view of God. When we get in these moments and we get in these places where we don't understand, or at these crucial cross points, all three of these things, our views can change. And today we're going to spend some time, just a few minutes, talking about a guy in the Bible whose name is Paul. And the Apostle Paul went through several moments in his life that were defining moments. And today we're going to look at just one moment. But in this moment of his life, we're going to look at not only how it was defining, but how he got through it, and how we can take the principles in these verses and apply them into our lives today. And the passage we're going to look at is coming from the New Testament book of 2 Corinthians. And if you know anything about the story of Paul, you know that first he started off in his life as somebody who hated followers of Christ. So much so that he tried to kill them and eliminate them from the world. And then he had a defining moment where God showed up to him and his life was radically changed. And he went from trying to kill Christians to try to spread the gospel of Jesus to more and create more followers of Christ. And so in these words he's writing, and he's got a backstory too. He's also got a story that he's seen God show up in his life over and over again and help him through moments of trouble, through moments of persecution, through shipwrecks. Through all of this life, Paul is writing from a history of experience. And he experienced something that changed him and his relationship with God in a powerful way. And it taught him a valuable lesson. And we're going to look at that today. And it starts in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 8. And Paul writes this, and Paul, I love how he opens up verses because he's always very positive. He says, brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the hard times. Like, oh, that's a great way to lead into that one. He goes, hard times we're having in Asia Minor. We were having a lot of trouble. It was more than we could stand, even that we even thought we were going to die. Like, just throw it out there, Paul. Like, tell us how you really feel. And I love this because, like I said, Paul is somebody who's been through a lot. Like, these aren't first world problems for Paul. If you know what first world problems are, it's things that we make a big deal of that really aren't a big deal. Like, man, we're going through some hard times. Meyer was out of almond milk. Like, man, it's really, really hard. Or like, man, we're having a lot of trouble. My cell phone's Wi-Fi is not working, or we're out of data. Like, we have some problems that are first world problems. Paul is going through something that he thinks is going to take his life. And he's been through a lot. And so he's writing from a place of like, man, this is really difficult. Paul didn't live this country club style life. He lived a very difficult, challenging life. But he was someone who intimately understood what pain and suffering can be and can do, but he also believed in something greater. And his life has moments that challenged him, and we have moments that challenge us. And what Paul does is he tells us that this is on purpose. You know, we're going to have struggles, we're going to have things, we're going to have events that happen in our lives that we need to not only let happen, but learn from. And as we look at one of these lessons today, I want you to try to maybe find yourself in this story. And Paul picks up with his hardships in the next verse, in verse 9. And it says, in fact, we felt as if we were under the sentence of death. But that happened so that we would not depend on ourselves, but on God. He raises the dead to life. And you see, Paul writes these words. He goes, we don't want to depend on ourselves. That hit me this week. How often do we depend on ourselves? How often do we try to be the solution to all of our problems? That we think, man, if we can just get control, if we can just get our hands on it, then we will fix it. You see, Paul's saying that's never how it's supposed to be. We should not have to depend on ourselves. Paul tells us that one is the way that God uses this event in his life was to remind him to trust. That is a difficult thing. Because what trust means, and what trust is here for Paul, it's not something that God wanted to teach Paul 2,000 years ago. It's something that he wants to remind us of and teach us every single day. Is that trust is relying on God rather than ourselves. And that seems like a no-brainer, right? Like if I told you, like, hey, you should trust on God, not yourself. All of us in here, whether you're a Christian, I would be like, okay, that sounds like, I mean, if he's all-powerful, all-knowing, then yeah, I should trust him. But the truth is, we don't do that very often. And if I were to tell you, you have to choose between putting your trust in the rest of your life, and you only have two choices, you or God, who would we choose? And you know who you are. Like, you know all of the hang-ups, you know all of your weaknesses, you know what you're good at, you know what you're not. And so then you have a God who claims to know everything, who claims to have, your best interest in mind. Who do we trust? And it seems like a no-brainer, and it seems like something we should all easily do. But the choice to do that is difficult. Even though it feels like a no-brainer, it's difficult, it's hard, and very few of us actually do it. And the truth is, if we want to live and hand over the trust of our lives to God, it means what we have to do is let go of control of our lives. And that's something that not a lot of us enjoy doing. Very few of us, if any, like to do that. But what if it's what God knows is best for us? What if God can use difficult situations where we're forced to come to a point where it's the end of ourselves, it's the end of our resources, it's the end of our skills, and we have to get to a point where we trust in him? And what if God lets these situations or allows us to go through these situations, not because he's mad at us, not because he's angry with us, but because he loves us to a point where he wants us to teach us something that can help us live the best life he's designed for us. Because imagine how your life would look. Imagine how my life would look if every day, rather than primarily trusting ourselves, we for a moment took that trust and relied on God for a moment. It's a scary thing. It puts us in a vulnerable spot. It takes the driver's wheel out of our hands. But from what I've seen, God's got a pretty good track record. And you see, Paul learns this. And the second thing that Paul learns is in verse 10, in 2 Corinthians 1, verse 10. It says, God has saved us from deadly dangers, and he will continue to do it. We have to put our hope in him. He will continue to save us. You see, Paul not only understands this idea of trust, but the reason why he has this deep understanding of trust and reliance on God is because he's seen him come to the rescue over and over again. In his own life, the real troubles, the real dangers that he was going through, he allowed and he saw God show up over and over again. And I think sometimes when we look at this word rescue, we get a misconception of what that means. I think a lot of times we think of rescue as being taken out of a situation. And maybe we pray for God to take us out of situations. Maybe we pray, God, take away this loneliness, God. Take away this anger. Take away this struggle. Take away, the infertility. Whatever it is, God, take away this relationship. Whatever it is, we pray for God to take those things away. And there's nothing wrong with that. You look through the scriptures, David prayed for God to do that. Jesus prayed that if there was another way, do it. But what if being rescued by God doesn't mean just to be taken out of something? What if it means that God also is giving us the strength to go through something? What if that's what rescue is? Not just being taken away from something, but given the strength to go through something. What if God's idea of rescue is different from how we look at it, and it's not the removal from a situation, but it's the strength to go through? You see, regardless of the type of rescue, Paul learned from his pain and his hardships that God is faithful to him. That God has a deep understanding that God will be there and continue to be there in the future. He has this deep understanding. And you see, that's a truth that every one of us can hold on to as well. That whatever horrible thing or trial or defining moment you're going through at this time, there's a God who loves you. There's a God who cares about you. And there's a God who has a great track record of showing up, maybe not removing you from a situation, but walking through every situation with you. That's an amazing type of rescue. Because what that means is you're never alone in these moments. You have someone who's there, someone who's walking with you, and someone who deeply cares for you. You see, Paul understood that. And he continues on in the next verse, in verse 11. And it says this. He says, so you must help us by praying for us. Then many people will give thanks because of what will happen to us. They will thank God for his kindness to us and your kindness to us in answer to the prayers of many. So Paul understood that there's a trust in God. He understands that there's a God who rescues. And the last thing Paul understands is he understands the power of prayer. Paul understood that when people gather, when the followers of Christ gather, and they pray for one another, there's something powerful that happens. There's something deeply profound and powerful that happens. And I love that word in the beginning of the verse that says the word help. The help of many. This idea of working together. Paul's saying to the followers of Jesus, he says, listen, we are going to lock arms together. And as you pray for me, I'm going to pray for you. And there's something special that happens. There's something that creates a movement of God when we partner together in prayer with one another. You see, it's difficult for us to do that because in order for us to pray for each other, we have to be honest with each other. And a lot of times we don't like to do that. And you see, Paul paints this incredible picture of what prayer looks like. And what he paints for us is he shows us that when someone is struggling, when someone is going through a difficult time in life, there are ways that we can love, support, encourage them through the idea of prayer. Because it's through our prayers God listens. God hears those prayers. He hears the cries of our hearts. And so when we're going through these moments, when you're going through a time in your life, maybe right now or in the future, where you're saying this has the potential to be a defining moment in who I am, why would we not want to cover it in that idea of prayer? And you see in the second part of the verse, Paul says that when God answers prayer, we all celebrate and give thanks. You see, I believe that we serve a God who can answer prayer. We serve a God who loves. We serve a God who cares. And I believe Paul lays out the blueprint for us to go through these defining moments together. And it begins with trust. And so I encourage you this week to try to trust. In these moments where you're going through a defining moment, we have to trust and we have to rely on God rather than ourselves. We have to remember that he rescues. And if he's done it once, he'll continue to do it again. And the last thing we have to remember is to partner in prayer. You see, these three things right here, if we apply them to our defining moments in life, what they can do and what they can help us accomplish is to see God in a new light. In a way, it can allow us to become closer with who he is. And so what we have to do is we have to let defining moments draw us closer to our Creator. In these moments where life is difficult, where life is hard, and where we are challenged, we can use those moments to draw closer to our Creator. A lot of times we try to stand away and drive ourselves away, but what I see Paul doing is actually leaning in to someone who loves him, to someone who cares about him, and to someone who will walk through any situation with him. And so how we're going to wrap up today is earlier you saw Andrew's story. And you heard about his story and how his father passed away. And one of the questions that he continued to ask was, why God? And maybe some of you have asked that. Maybe some of you have asked that question, God, why am I going through this? Why did this moment have to happen? God, why did my business have to close? God, why? And the thing I love about a church like this is it's okay to have those questions. It's okay to have that space here where you can ask that, where you can express that, and not feel judged or condemned or like you're less than. And so what we're going to do today is the band's going to come out in just a moment, and they're going to lead us in a song. And as they're doing that, I'm going to encourage you to come up to the front of the stage. And there's cards all across the stage. And what you're going to do is you're going to take it back to your seat. And maybe you have a prayer. Maybe you have a question. Maybe you have something burning inside of you that you need to get off your chest. We want to give you the space to do that. We want to give you the space to maybe write that down, get it out of your inside, get it external. And then later on, we're going to give you a chance to lay it up here and maybe pray with somebody else's as you take it later. We'll explain that moment. But what I think that does and how I think that affects us is it allows us to acknowledge our pain, acknowledge our suffering, and bring it to a God who loves us, who cares about us, and who wants to walk through it with you. Would you pray with me? God, thank you for today. And thank you for just this time where we could come together. Thank you for the stories of Paul. Thank you for the stories of who he is, God. Thank you for his trust in you, as it's an example of how we can take our moments, our time, our pain, our suffering, and bring them to you, God. That we can trust that you're a God who loves us, that you're a God who can rescue us, God, and you're a God who listens to our prayers. We thank you, and we love you in Jesus' name. Amen.
dream from. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, so good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, so good. Oh, let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I dream from. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, would you like to stand with us and worship? You are good, so good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, so good. Oh, you are good, so good.
So as we finish singing the song, if you had an opportunity to come up and grab a card and write something, we encourage you to leave whatever that is on here. And so if you haven't grabbed a time or haven't grabbed a card, it'd be a great opportunity as we sing this song and we talk about how God is who's never going to let us down. As we write our prayers and we leave these here together, if there's one up here that doesn't belong to you, we encourage you to take that with you and pray for that person this week. Let's sing this together.
You're never gonna let me down. Let's sing this out. You're never gonna let me down. We declare that you're never gonna let me down. Come on. 'Cause you're never gonna let me down. No, no, no. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. Oh, you're never
Hey, this week, if you didn't get a chance to get one of these cards, we'd love for you to do that maybe on your way out. And, if you're introverted like me, for some of you, like, I don't know if I want to step up in front of everybody and do that, and that's okay too. Here's what I would say to you, though. The value in having a moment like this or having like a momentum like that, or a memento like that, is that it really is a catalyst for you in some ways to take a step. And I think all of us at some point or another need to figure out how do we take a step out of the place that we're in when it comes to some of the things that Joe talked about today. So make sure that you do that. The other thing I want to let you know about is next week we are continuing our series, Defining Moments. It's going to be a fantastic week. We're going to get to hear from one of the teaching pastors on today. His name is Danny Cox, and their story is an incredible story of adoption and the way that God showed up in that. So we would love to invite you back next week for that as well. And the last thing I want to just remind you of is we're going to be doing a parent meeting in here immediately following our service. So we're going to dismiss you here in a second. We're going to take about 2 to 5 minutes. We're in that range, and then do the parent meeting. So if you're a parent of K-Kids or if you have somebody in student ministries, we would love for you to do this. If you would step forward and kind of come towards the front in the first couple of rows, and then we'll start our parent meeting here in just a few minutes. Again, thanks so much for being here. We'll see you right back here next Sunday. See you soon. Thank you so much for watching online. Again, we're so thankful that you're part of this growing community of people that join us by watching digitally. And so if you're not following us on social media yet, we would love for you to do that. That's really one of the best ways you can find out all the information about our church, about who we are, and all the things that are coming up. So if you could do that, that'd be amazing. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we'd love to invite you to be a part of that. The other thing I want to let you know about is next week we're continuing our series called Defining Moments. You're going to hear a story from Danny Cox. Danny is an incredible leader, an incredible friend of mine, and his story of parenting and adoption is one that you're not going to want to miss. So we'd invite you back next week to either watch this online or join us in person. We're here in Traverse City. We'd love for you to join us here, but we also have campuses all over Metro Detroit and in Orlando, Florida as well. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you soon.
welcome to Kensington Online. My name is Greg. We are filling up here, and we're going to get started shortly. We have a great day planned for you. The worship team has some awesome music. We've got a fun opener. And I want to say thank you to everyone who likes and shares our content online through Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You really are an integral part sharing our message of love and hope and forgiveness literally around the world. So thanks for doing that. And hey, we are in our first week of a brand new series we're calling Defining Moments. We all have those moments in our lives that we can look back and see that they really shaped us and formed us. And those moments in lives where we kind of had a crossroads to take one direction or another. So that is what we're going to be wrestling with today. Well, we are just about to get started, and we have a great one. We'll see you soon.
Help me. It's like the walls are caving in. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but I just can't. It isn't in my blood. Laying on the bathroom floor, feeling nothing. I'm overwhelmed and insecure. Give me something. I could take my wasted mind slowly. Just have a drink and you'll feel better. Just take her home and you'll feel better. Keep telling me that it gets better. Does it ever? Help me. It's like the walls are caving in. Sometimes I feel like giving up. The medicine is strong enough. Someone help me. I'm crawling in my skin. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but I just can't. It isn't in my blood. It isn't in my blood. Looking through my phone again, feeling anxious, afraid to be alone again. I hate this. Trying to find a way to chill. I can't breathe, no. Is there somebody who can help me? It's like the walls are caving in. Sometimes I feel like giving up. No medicine is strong enough. Someone help me. I'm crawling in my skin. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but I just can't. It isn't in my blood. It isn't in my blood. I need somebody now. I need somebody now. Someone to help me out. Yes, I need somebody now. And help me. It's like the walls are caving in. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but I just can't. It isn't in my blood. 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 Yes, I need somebody now. It isn't in my blood.
Let's give it up one more time for this band here. Way to go. Anybody heard that song on the radio? You know, any Shawn Mendes fans in here? Yeah, we love that song around here because this is really the theme for this upcoming series, that giving up is not an option. And what we're calling this series is Defining Moments. So that's what we're going to be wrestling with today. What do we do when we encounter those moments in life where we really have a critical decision to make? So get ready for that today. Well, my name is Greg. Welcome to Kensington Church. We are so glad that you are here with us today. And if it's your first time, an extra special welcome. We actually have an environment just for you out in the lobby after the service that we call Starting Point. So if you want to shake a hand and get to know someone out there, we gather a little bit of information and just really get that conversation started about how you can be involved here and a little bit more about who we are as Kensington Church. And if you don't want to stop by or don't have time, maybe you're picking up the kiddos right after the service, you can actually go to startingpoint.today on your phone, even now, and fill out a quick form and get the conversation started that way. Well, we do have a great service planned for you. As I mentioned, it's first week in our new series we're calling Defining Moments. We have Joel Leal giving the message, and actually a video segment from Andrew Kim, who is one of our teaching pastors down in Metro Detroit. Well, there's a couple things that I'd love to get on your radar. If you could pull out your program that they handed you when you walked in the door. The first thing is Spring Hill Day Camps is coming up. It's less than a month away. And now this is an environment that Spring Hill, we know that they have a great camp in Michigan, but they actually bring all the fun and excitement to our location right here in Traverse City. So the rock climbing walls and the bungee cords and the archery and the slides, all of that is so much fun. So we'd love for you to sign up your kids or your grandkids. You can find out more information on Spring Hill's website, or you can stop at the info table out in the lobby, and you'll get it connected up there. I'm sorry about the popping. It's just like, me and butterflies here. Getting distracted, but forgive us for that. But the other thing is we have a render service coming up this Wednesday. How many have been to a render service? Yeah, a lot of us. And so many of us haven't yet, and I would encourage you. It is such an incredible time. We gather together for some worship through song over in Room 100 where our students meet. It's more of an intimate environment. We hear some awesome biblical teaching, and there's always a time built in to gather together, shake some hands, and get to know some of the people that call this place home. So I would encourage you to come out this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Well, at this time, would you stand up and give a high five or a handshake to those people around you and ask them this question? Did you hear Laurel or Yanni?
Hey everybody, this is Patrick, and I just wanted to say thanks again for watching our service today online and being a part of this community. Now, we know that you might have some questions as you watch the service today and want to find out a little bit more information about who we are. And so we've created an environment for you to do just that. Simply go to startingpoint.today. That's startingpoint.today, and fill out that short form, and one of our staff members will reach out to you very shortly and answer any questions that you have about our church and about who we are. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back at the end of the service today to give you a little bit more information, but we'll see you here in just a few minutes.
Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you guys are doing good. My name is Ryan. I'm the worship arts director here. This is Carrie and Megan and Bryce. As you can see, this is kind of a little stripped down today, but we want to invite you guys to stand and worship with us. Before we get started, the first song we're going to lead you guys in is called Lion and the Lamb, and I just wanted to kind of unpack the big idea with you guys, because at first glance when you see the lyrics it could be confusing, but what I love about this song is that it describes God as a lion with strength and power, as well as a lamb with gentleness and empathy and compassion. And I think those are two big ideas we can really grab hold of as we worship. And I know for myself, I just need sometimes some handles on why I sing a song. So if that's you out there, and maybe you get the compassion side of God and you get the fact that he's gentle, but the fact that he's strong and he can be in your life and he can actually be something in the midst of your struggle while you're trying to go through life, that's something for you. Grab hold of that lyric and sing from that place. But maybe you're like me and sometimes you don't get the gentle side of God, and sometimes that's something that you forget. That aspect of God, I just want to encourage you, when you sing it, let's sing it from a place of, God, I want to know more of you. God, I want to see all the sides of you, not just the parts that I get. You guys ready to sing with us? All right, let's sing this together. coming on the clouds. He's coming on the clouds. Kings and kingdoms will bow down. And every chain will break. His broken hearts declare his praise. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Let's sing it out. So our God is the Lion of Judah. He is roaring with power and fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before him, our God. 'Cause our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. And every knee will bow before him. Hey! Whoa. Sing, open up the gates. So open up the gates, make way before the King of Kings. A God who's come to save is here to set the captives free. For who can stop the Lord? Oh, we're singing out, come on. So our God is the Lion of Judah. He is rolling with power and fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before we sing our God. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. And every knee will bow before him. All right, with all that we got, if you feel comfortable, let's sing this together. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? There is no one. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Oh, we sing it louder. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? There is no one. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? There is no one. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? We declare, who can stop the Lord? Yeah. All right, let's sing it out. Come on. Yes, our God is the Lion of Judah. He is roaring with power and fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before him, our God. 'Cause our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before him.
If love endured that ancient cross, how precious is my Savior's blood. image of love upon death's frame. If having my heart was worth the pain, what joy could you see beyond the grave? If love found my soul worth flying for, how wonderful, how glorious, my Savior's cause, victorious, my chains are gone, my debt is paid, from death to life, and grace to grace. If heaven now owns that vacant tomb, how great is the hope that lives in you. The passion that tore through hell like a rose, the promise that rolled back death and its stone. Freedom is worth the life you risked. Where is my sin? Where is my shame? Oh, Jesus, love paid it all to have my heart. How wonderful, how glorious, my Savior's cause, victorious, my chains are gone, my debt is paid, from death to life, and grace to grace. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I'll see Jesus. From death to life, I will sing you praise in the wonder. When I see that cross, I'll see freedom. When I see that grave, I'll see Jesus. From death to life, I'll sing you praise. The wonder of your grace. How my soul will sing your praise. The wonder of your grace. How my soul will sing your praise. How wonderful, how glorious, my Savior's cause, victorious, my chains are gone, my debt is paid, from death to life, and grace to grace.
So like a lot of you, I grew up in church. I grew up in church most of my life. I grew up in a home that would identify like a Christian home, and which meant that we had crosses like everywhere. Anybody else like this? You had crosses like in your house. You had crosses in your bathroom. You had crosses like in the living room. They're everywhere. And it's so interesting for us that are followers of Jesus. When you sing a song like that, or when you see a picture of a cross, you know, in some ways, sometimes it feels decorative now. You know, sometimes it feels like something we celebrate, and it is something we celebrate, but it's not something we celebrate because of the death that happened on it, you know? Because when you actually go back and you think about this, and if, you know, for those of you who are not followers of Jesus, or, you know, you're a history buff, you know, the cross in the ancient Roman world was a means of execution. It was a means of slow death. In fact, they had perfected how to do that to people. And the claim of Christianity is that the God, of the universe came in human form to the planet, and he came in the form of Jesus. And Jesus walked around on this earth. He did extraordinary things. He taught things that was subversive and that disrupted the world. Then he was killed. And he was killed on a cross, and he was left to suffocate on a cross, and he died on a cross. The reason that we sing a song like that, and the reason that we believe what we believe, and the reason that we even gather here at all today is because we believe that he didn't just die on the cross. That in the moment when they thought that they had defeated the movement, in the moment when they thought that he was dead, 3 days later he rose from the grave. And his resurrection was pointing to the resurrection of our hearts and our lives, or pointing to the resurrection of the world. The God of the universe loved us so much that he would allow Jesus to die on that ancient torture device that we now celebrate, because on this side of history we can. Because death did not defeat the Savior of the world. He overcame it all. Thanks so much for singing with us. You can go ahead and have a seat. We're so glad you're here. If it's your first time, you're like, who's this guy? My name's Patrick. I'm the lead pastor here. And one thing I don't get to do very often is sometimes I don't get to introduce our staff. So, no, before you run away, no, get back here. No, come on. I see you. He thought he was going to sneak out. I want to introduce you. That was quick, man. Yeah. Then you just had a longer walk. Get up here. Come on. Here you go. I want to introduce you. This is my brother-in-law, number one, which makes him really much cooler than me. And you could also beat me up, so I'm a little nervous. But this is my brother-in-law. His name is Bryce Bell. Bryce is also our music director. Everybody say, hey, Bryce. Yeah, so Bryce, aren't you guys love the music? Don't they do such a phenomenal job? It's so good. And so I haven't really introduced him. He didn't know I was going to do this. And then at 9 o'clock I did it. And I was like, I'm going to do it again. And so that's why he was running away really quickly. But I want to tell you about Bryce. Bryce is our music director. So really all of our music teams, Bryce is leading them and, all of the music stuff that's going on. And then Ryan leads most of our singers and worship leaders and everything that happens in this room. That's kind of under his purview. But I know that a lot of you don't know Bryce, and you probably won't, because he's the most unassuming, the most humble, the kindest, just an incredible, incredible guy, incredible man, incredible father. But Bryce, I wanted to get to know you just to see, this is how incredible it is here musically. So Bryce, if you were around, if you liked Christian music back in the 90s, I would say 90s, early 2000s. I don't want to date you. Back, about 3 years ago. How about that? About 3 years ago. Bryce was really on world tours. He's played in, some of the biggest arenas in the world. He's gone all over the world playing. And then he also has a Grammy. How cool is that? When you get to hear Grammy Award winners, how fun is that? Yeah. And he hates it when I tell people this, but I'm like, I don't even care. You're my brother-in-law, it's so great. So anyway, I wanted to introduce you to Bryce so that you get to know him a little bit. If you see him, give him a high five, and let you know that if you're also interested in music and, I play an instrument and I want to be part of that, we'd love to connect with you. Bryce is the guy to do that with. Give him a hug. He's a hugger. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Is about 1,000 people give me a hug? Good thing? He's running still. So anyway, hey, one more time, give it up for Bryce. So thankful for him. Does a phenomenal job. So great. If you're interested in volunteering in our production and music teams, we'd love to connect with you. And the people that do this stuff are just amazing. They're just so amazing. And we'd love for you to connect with them. Now, that said, I want to invite our ushers to move forward. We're going to receive our offering. I want to let you know a couple of things around this. Last week, we did a video. How many of you were here last week when we did the video for Clinton Township? Anybody here for that? Yeah. And so I don't know if you know this or not, but when it comes to the Clinton Township building, we just built a brand new building kind of on the east side of Metro Detroit, and they had been meeting as like a portable church for I think almost 9 years. Set up and tear down. People get there at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, set it all up, tear it all down. The crazy thing is they became one of the largest churches in the area, and we're like, how do we get them a building, and how do we go about that? And so what I wanted to say to you is if you attend Kensington and you give, you were a part of making that happen, which is extraordinary. So thank you so much for doing that. And then next week, you're going to get to see a little bit of a glimpse into what they did down there with their launch, and it's going to be fun. The other thing, too, is I wanted you to know we made a video. We put it online. We got like a little over 1,000 views on that video, which is pretty great. So thanks so much for sharing that. Thanks for liking it and being a part of all those things. And I want to say this, too. For those of you who are, you're visiting or, your first-time guest or somebody, they've been inviting you. You finally showed up, and they're like, oh, this is the part where they ask for all my money. That is true, right? We do ask for money, and I'll tell you why. Not all your money, but I'll tell you why. We talk about money here, is we believe that if we come together as a community and we give, we want you to give not because we just want your money, even though we think that's important. We think that when you give, you're a part of a group of people that are also giving so that we can do amazing things throughout our community. And so we give so much of the money to our community. We're involved in so many initiatives that make Traverse City a better city. So we're very passionate about that. But on the other side of it, and this is one of my favorite things, I love to talk to people who either just started attending our church, they don't believe with us at all theologically, they disagree with me the whole time I speak, all this, but they give, and what they're giving towards is the initiatives that we do both locally and globally. And so if you're part of Kensington and you give here, what you're doing is you're actually giving to organizations that reach over 500,000 people all over the world, right? Now just think about that for a minute. Over 500,000 people all over the world. One of the things that we do is we try to bring clean water to a place in Africa that doesn't have it. The thing that I'm most passionate that we are a part of is we're involved in bringing young girls out of sex trafficking in Nepal and then helping them be able to get jobs and move into greater success in their communities. And that all happens because people like you are a part of it. And so I just wanted to say, I know we say it every week, but I just want to say thank you so much for being a part and giving. And then I always tease, because this is fun for me, there are some people that like give, like, well, if the talk was good, I'll give $20. That's always fun. Like the tippers, I jokingly said this a few weeks ago, like you're a tipper, you know, and that's great. Here's what I would say to you. When the baskets come, we're so thankful that you give, and we're so thankful that if you enjoy it, that you give to it. But the other thing that I would say is if you're not consistently giving or you don't have a plan for giving, you can do that in a really easy way. So you can do that through our app, or you can just do Kensington Church on whatever app store that you have to do that. Or you can go on our website and you go to kensingtonchurch.org/give. And that's one of the best ways to make sure that you're kind of giving to something that's bigger than you. The other thing I wanted to tell you too, before we jump into the talk, is we have a transition on our staff that's going to be coming up that I wanted to let you know about. Some of you already know about it if you're in some of our K-Kids or student environments. Some of you have probably heard this already. But I wanted to let us all know the speaker today is Joe Leal, which I'm super excited about. He's one of my favorite speakers. And Joe's going to be speaking. It's an incredible message, but Joe is going to be stepping off of our team from our student director role. And that's a big shift for us. Joe came up here about 2 years ago with his wife, Taylor, and Taylor leads all of our K-Kids environments. She's going to continue leading in K-Kids, but he's stepping off of our team to do some other things. And I think I wanted you to know that, but not only did I want you to know that, but we wanted to celebrate Joe. Now, if you have a middle school or a high school student, you know this, that's one of the most difficult age groups at all, both to parent through and then to even like them. Some of you are like, I'm a parent of a middle schooler, and I'm just still trying to decide in 7th grade, are we good here? I'm just totally kidding. I'm a middle school pastor for almost 15 years. I love it. Middle school is my favorite environment. But I would say, like, for you guys, it's a tough thing to figure out how to navigate. How do you do that? And I would say Joe's come up here and done an extraordinary job of getting those things off the ground, creating great environments for your students. But then the other thing that I think he's done an amazing job at is he launched what we call 18 to 29. And this is an environment for anybody who's in the 18 to 29-year-old demographic. And the way that this came about is it wasn't even part of his job description, but they just started inviting people over to his house. And it started with 3 or 4 people, then it started with 10 people, and it started with 20 people, and then it became like 40 people, and we're like, how do we feed all these people? And so then they broke off, and they've got a couple of those things going now. And they've just done an extraordinary job. If you watch our baptisms, now this is always so emotional for me, so many of our baptisms are students and kids and 18 to 29-year-olds because of the work that they've been doing. It's been an amazing, amazing journey. So here's what I ask you to do. In a minute, Joe's going to come out and speak. It's going to be following an emotional video. So you're like, can I clap here? Yes. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is when Joe comes out, I'm going to ask you just to unload on him and say thank you. Can you guys help me do that? So when he comes out, he's going to be coming out after the video. I just want you guys to thank him because he's just done an incredible job getting all the stuff off the ground. 18 to 29, all the bad. I mean, he's an amazing guy. So we'd love for you to do that when he comes out. Now, the video you're about to watch is going to set up his message, though, and it's from a guy who's named Andrew Kim. Andrew is one of our teaching pastors at our Troy campus downstate. You're going to get to hear a little bit of a story about how he had some brokenness going on in his life, but God walked him through that, helped him to come out on the other side, and then Joe's going to be teaching about that here in just a few minutes. So we'll watch the video. We're going to lose our minds for Joe, and then he's going to teach, and it's going to be incredible. Does that work? 3 things. That looked odd on camera, but 3 things. All right, let's watch this video together.
between the years of 1993 and 1995. And in order to understand my story during that period of time, you have to understand a little bit of my parents' story. And for my mom and my dad, they immigrated from Korea to Canada back in the 1970s in search of a better life. But it's not like their lives were bad in Korea. That wasn't it at all. Their lives were actually pretty good. My mom, she graduated first in her class from one of the best women's universities in all of Korea, and she had a great job teaching. And my dad was working at a company that's now known as LG before coming to Canada. But they gave that all up so that they could come to Canada and so that my dad could go to grad school. And to understand why they would do that, you have to understand how a lot of Koreans and really how a lot of Asians viewed the West back then, because they viewed the West as having the best jobs, the best opportunities, the best schools, the best you fill in the blank. So my dad eventually got his PhD and he got an incredible job offer. And from everything that my mom has told me about this job, it not only paid extremely well, but it had incredible benefits. And so after so many years of my family barely making ends meet because he was a full-time student for so long, it finally looked like things were going to turn around. But right as my family was getting ready to move to the new city where my dad's new job was, he was diagnosed with stomach cancer. And at the time, I was 4 years old. And like every 4-year-old boy, I loved my father. One of the memories that I have of him is that when my sister and I, when we would get in trouble, my mom would send us into the corner. And whenever my dad would come home and he found us in the corner, he would get us out. He would break us out of jail. And every night when he would come home, my dad would go through this ritual where he would wash his hands, he would wash his face, he would wash his feet, he would basically wash off the day. And as a 4-year-old, I just wanted to be with him. And so I would do the exact same thing. But as a 4-year-old, he passed away. And that was probably one of the most difficult things that I've gone through in my life, looking back at that. So my mom's situation at the time was that she had no husband, she had 2 young children, she had very little money, and she was in a country that didn't recognize her college degree and where she didn't know the language very well and she didn't know the culture very well. And so you would have thought the next logical move would have been for her to take her 2 children and to move back to Korea, where my grandparents could have helped her get back on her feet, and also where she probably could have gotten a job teaching again. But that's not what she chose to do. And she knew that even if she had to give up all of her hopes and dreams, if she stayed in Canada, that my sister and I, we would receive a good education and that we would have a chance at being successful in the end. And so that's why she stayed. And my mom worked so hard to raise my sister and me. And she was a small business owner, and small is the operative word because she was the only one who worked there for more than 20 years, which meant that it didn't matter whether she was feeling amazing, it didn't matter whether she was deathly ill, she had to go to work. What that also meant was that for more than 20 years, she never got a break, she never got a vacation. And also because she didn't speak the language very well, she faced a lot of racism and prejudice as well. And for me, growing up without a dad wasn't the easiest thing to do either. And it got particularly hard when I got to high school, because in high school for 2.5 long years, I was bullied. And there were these 3 guys in high school who made my life so incredibly difficult. And I absolutely hated going to school. I dreaded going to school during that season. But one of the things that I had learned going to church as a kid was that before you go to bed, you should pray. And so I had done that for many years. And so during that season, I remember every single night turning off the lights and sitting on my bed. But before I would pray every single night, I would just break down and cry because what I was going through was so painful, it hurt so much. And so every single night, I would just sit on my bed and I would cry and I would cry and I would cry. And I would sit there and ask God the same question almost every single night. And the question that I asked God during that season of my life was, why did you have to take my dad? Because I believe that even as a kid, that if my dad had been around, that I either wouldn't have been bullied or wouldn't have gone on for 2.5 long years. Because he was my dad, and he would have either stepped in and stopped it, or he would have shown me what I was supposed to do as a man. All the years that I asked him during that season, all the years that I've asked him since then, I've never received an answer. But what I did get was something that was so much greater, so much more extraordinary than the answer to that question. Because it was during that time that I met Jesus in the most incredible, personal, and transformative way. I met Jesus in a way that I knew that he was real, that he wasn't just a person in a book. He wasn't just a person in just a bunch of lessons that people told me to believe when I went to church. But I came to understand that during that season that he was real. Because during those nights that I would ask that question, and during those times where I would sit on my bed and I would cry, that I couldn't see, but I could feel the presence of Jesus sitting next to me, feeling my pain to the very core of my being. And I remember during that season, I said to him that if you are willing to walk with me during the most difficult and darkest and most desperate times of my life, that I will follow you for the rest of my life.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. Thank you guys so much. And it's awkward coming out of that video and that, and so we'll all just work through it together. But thank you guys so much. I really appreciate that and love being here with you guys today. As we start this series called Defining Moments, ironically enough, it is a defining moment. Maybe for some of you, a lot of you in life have had these moments similar to for me right now. That's in a defining moment where things are changing and there's transition and there's life. And it's one of those where it's easy to try to figure out what's going on, and it's really easy to also have no idea what's going on. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about this idea of defining a moment. So whether you've had one now or you're in the middle of one or had one last week or tonight, hopefully what this will do is give you some framework of how to work through those and to see how God can use those things and help us develop what to do in our lives when they happen. And so I actually had a defining moment this week that maybe some of you guys had as well. I was sitting there just on a normal, I think it was a Tuesday afternoon, when something happened, and all of a sudden my conversations with friends changed, and we started talking about something that I didn't think we'd ever talk about. And then I had a conversation with my mom and dad, and I began to look at them differently because of their stance on it. And then I began to have a conversation with my wife, and I realized this is why I married you. There was something that happened that was really difficult and really challenging for, I think, all of us to sort out, and it was a defining moment with how I viewed people. Maybe it's going to define how I view you, but it was this stupid Yanny and Laurel thing. Am I right? Like, this was a defining moment. Like, what do you hear? Raise your hand if you hear Yanny. Okay, we're going to send you back to our K-Kids area. You're going to work with the nursery because your hearing's not working anyway, so crying babies won't distract you. We're the Laurel people. You guys are the favorites. You guys are right. Good job. We'll give you a round of applause. But these conversations, I remember talking to my mom, and my mom was like, I hear Yanni, like the old piano player with the long hair. And I'm like, Mom, no, like Yanni? Like, no, you're wrong. And so all of this was defining moments that led me to try to figure out who I can cut out of my life and who are my true friends. And so I kind of figured that out now again, so that's helpful to know. But what I like to look at about defining moments is I believe that defining moments have the ability to shape and shift how we view the world. When things happen that are important, or when things that happen are profound, and when we have moments in our life that kind of lead us to a crossroads, what those moments can do over time is begin to shape and shift how we view the world. And so there's been times in my life, and I can remember specific moments in my life where I can look back as that moment shifted or shaped how I view the world today. And one of my earliest memories was when I was 5 years old. I actually do physically remember walking in and accepting an award. At 5 years old, I got an award. I don't know what the award was for, but I got an award. And it was a big deal because my parents coached me before I went up and got the award. And so if you've ever had kids and you've had to coach them, what they told me to do is great advice. They said, go and shake every person's hand and say thank you and look at them in the eye. Like most of you parents probably gave your children those advice as well. And so at 5 years old, I took that advice and said, forget about that idea. And so as I was receiving this award, instead of walking and shaking like we had rehearsed at home, what I chose to do was to stick my tongue out at every person. And so as I'm walking down the line, instead of going, thank you, I'm going, and like doing this over and over again, which is not a good look when you're 5, I assume. And so it was a defining moment when I got home that day. And so I never forget that day. And so that was the first one that I remember that was like, that's not all right. That's not how this works. The second one, I truly remember when I was 8 years old. I was sitting on a couch, and my parents were letting me stay up way too late. It was past midnight, and the Detroit Red Wings were in a Game 7 against the St. Louis Blues. And I remember sitting on my couch way past my bedtime. It was almost midnight, and then this happens.
We'll obviously going to have more of the quick changes on these lines here as we go into this second overtime. Gretzky had it, lost it. Eisenman picks it up. Eisenman moving, blue line chance.
I remember that. I remember jumping up and down, and for the first time in my life, I cried at a sporting event. And I had this passion for sports ever since, and I remember sitting there jumping up and down, just crying with joy because the Red Wings beat the Blues, and I was so excited. And that shaped my life. And then as life continues, for some of you like me, high school, that was a defining moment. I had a really good high school experience. I loved my high school experience, and so for me, I look back on high school very fondly. Then I went to college, and it's a miracle. That's how I know there's a God, that I graduated college, and I accepted the diploma, and I'm still paying the bills, so that's how you know it's real, all right? So I have that for me. And then after college, really the true act of God was I convinced my wife to marry me. And that was a defining moment because it's like, don't mess this one up. You got it, okay? And then a wedding, that is the largest wedding party of all time, I think. And that was our wedding. That was a defining moment. And then we bought a house, and that was oh, I have to adult now. When the furnace goes out, who do I call? I thought just that fixes it. No, you have to figure that out. That was the defining moment. And then just last summer, we welcomed our baby Jackson into the world. And so all of these moments for me personally were defining moments. I could look back at all of these things and say those all shaped and shifted how I viewed the world. And maybe for some of you, you're going through the timeline right now. You're walking through memories of your life and your time where you said that was how it was supposed to go. He's got so much hair when he came out. It's unbelievable. And so you're walking through how your life has shifted and how your life has changed from those defining moments. And these were all personal for me. You have your own stories that match these. But there's also moments that happen in history that maybe shape our lives a little bit. The first one you look back on is maybe your parents reminded you, or your parents experienced what the civil rights movement looked like. And how on this day a man gave a speech and it changed the trajectory of our country. And you look back at these moments and you say, that was a defining moment. Or maybe you can remember when the wall in Berlin fell. Maybe you remember learning about that in school or watching that and remember where you were when that happened and what that signified for our world. And then maybe some of you, a defining moment was just the entire 90s. That whole thing was a defining moment for you. Some of you are trying to forget that, but you're like, no, this was me. That was how I was. And then the 2000s came. And we all prepped for a disaster that never happened. And maybe the defining moment was your parents or you were the ones who stocked up on 18,000 gallons of water just in case there was never water again. And so you were the one who had the Y2K center in the basement. Maybe you still do. Congrats. And so that was a defining moment. And then as the turn of the century came, we all probably remember exactly where we were on a Tuesday morning when the news came across that our country was under attack. And maybe for that moment, that was the first time that maybe it was you as a parent where you said, man, what is the world that I'm bringing my kids into? What is this world? And then there's acts that we can't explain, acts like hurricanes. And we see the damage that a hurricane like Katrina caused in the 2000s. And even more recently, and we wonder, what is this world? How do we prepare for these defining moments? Maybe they encourage us to help others and to live more open-handedly with our lives because of what others were going through. Or maybe some of you really do believe in miracles, and when the Cubs won the World Series, you said, there is a God. He is real. 108 years later, it happened. And you can look back at moments through history and see defining moments. They do have the ability to shape and shift how we view the world. Maybe as we went through some of those, you remember where you were, you remember what you were thinking, you remember how that changed how you thought about the world. Defining moments have the ability to do that. We all have personal moments, but there's also moments that happen in our world, and maybe some of these are bringing back memories or feelings that you had at those times when those were happening in our lives. And maybe some of you, if we're really honest, are in a defining moment now. Maybe as you sit here today, maybe there's papers that have been served. Maybe there's a decision that's been made. Maybe there's a business that's going to be closed. And you're sitting here going, what am I supposed to do? Maybe you're at a crossroads in a relationship where you're at the spot where something either needs to change or you have to get out. And you're at that moment, you're at that spot, and you wonder, how am I supposed to handle this? And what am I supposed to do? Because what I've seen is that these defining moments, we can feel challenged. And defining moments can challenge us. They can push us to the edge. They can cause us to question things. They can put us in a position where we don't know what to do. And so we sit here and we go, how are we supposed to handle this? What are we supposed to do? And if we let it, defining moments can change our view. And they can change our view in a few ways. They can change our view of how we view ourselves at times. Maybe you're in a moment right now, and the way that it's happening, you are beginning to wonder if you are the problem with everything. And you think less of yourself because of the moments and the experiences that you're encountering, and maybe you're saying, it's all my fault. I'm like the loser. I'm the reject. I'm the reason why everything's failing. And so your view of yourself changes. In moments like this, we can also challenge our view of our world. When you watch the news and you see another school shooting this week, and you look at these moments, and some of you have kids who are in schools, and you wonder, is it safe for them? How is this happening? And our view of the world can shift. Our view of the world can change. And when we allow these things to change our view of ourselves and our world, one of the other things that can change is our view of God. So why would God allow this to happen? What is God trying to do? Why isn't he stopping these things? And our view of God in defining moments can change. We can begin to question, where is he? Why is he? What is he? We begin to ask all of these questions. And sometimes we feel like Andrew felt, never getting an answer. And so we're going to talk about this idea today. And we're going to look at it through the lens of a guy named Paul. And the Apostle Paul was a guy who walked and talked and breathed this earth. And he started off his life by hating followers of Christ. And then he had a defining moment. God showed up in a real way to him. And he went from being a person who wanted to kill Christians to someone who wanted to spread the love and the message of Jesus to everyone he met. And so he's in a unique position because he has a unique worldview of how he sees the world. And he experiences something that not only tests his relationship with God, but lays a roadmap for what you and I can and should do when we feel ourselves either at a crossroads or at a defining moment in our lives. And he teaches us a valuable lesson. And it's found in 2 Corinthians 1, and this is what we're going to look at today. It opens up with Paul saying this. And Paul, whenever he writes letters, I always love just how straight up he is. Like, he doesn't sugarcoat anything. He's not like, hey guys, how are you doing? He gets to the point, brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the hard times we had. I'm like, okay, Paul, like, say hello first. And he says, I want you to know about the hard times we had in Asia Minor. He says, we were having a lot of trouble. It was far more than we could stand. We even thought we were going to die. You see, the thing that we have to understand about Paul is Paul wasn't a guy who came from a country club style of life. He wasn't like a cushy guy. Paul struggled with some real stuff. He faced real problems. These weren't like, when I say like first world problems for us. Like some of our first world problems are like, man, we're going through some hard times. They don't have almond milk anymore. Like we're all out of almond. Like what are we going to do? Or we sit here and we go, man, we have a lot of trouble. I'm over my data for the month. Like, how are we going to live? Or we say, man, this is more than we could stand for. There's a line at Meijer. Like, you have no idea. Like, the self-checkouts, the people don't know how to use them. Like, why can't we figure this out? Or like, man, or if you have kids, you've heard, like, we're just going to die if we can't watch Netflix. And so you understand, those are first world problems. Those are not what Paul is going through. Paul is going through persecution. He's going through imprisonment. He's going through shipwrecks. His life is not going well. But Paul understands something. He understands that what he's going through and what he's facing has a purpose. And he has a deep conviction inside of him. And we're going to see three very important lessons that Paul not only learns, but lays out for us to follow. And as we look at each one of these lessons, I hope you can maybe find yourself and apply this to whatever situation you are going through. Because I don't believe that the Bible was written 2,000 years ago or for just them. I believe it applies to us today. And Paul continues writing in 2 Corinthians verse 9. And he says this, in fact, we felt as if we were under the sentence of death. He goes, life was so hard, I thought we were given a death sentence, but that happened so that we would not depend on ourselves, but on God. He's the one who raises the dead to life. You see, Paul says these words right here, and these struck me this week. It says, we will not depend on ourselves. That hit me like a ton of bricks in the face. Because how often do we depend on our own skill? We think that we're the ones who can fix these. We think if we get ourselves in a situation, then we have to be the ones to get it out. Like if I can get more control, if I can get my hands more on it, then it's all going to work out. Well, Paul lays out here, he says we have to get to the point where we take our hands off of it and learn to depend on God. He's the one who has the power. Paul tells us that one of the ways that God used this terrible event that was happening in his life was to teach him to trust. To teach him to trust. And you see, this is a lesson that God wanted to teach Paul, but I believe it's also a lesson that God is trying to get a hold of every one of us. Because I can speak from experience. The idea of trust is a tricky one. The idea, even as guys, to say we have to let go of control and give it to someone, I don't like that. I'm sure most of you guys don't like that. Relying on God is difficult. And it's weird because if you're just talking about it, it seems like a no-brainer. It seems like, listen, I can either trust God or trust myself. Like, yeah, I'm going to trust the big guy upstairs. Like, that seems like a no-brainer. But to actually practice that, to actually do that is difficult. Like, ask yourself the question, if you have to choose who you want to put your trust in for the rest of your life, and you only got two choices, you or God, who do you choose? Because you know yourself, hopefully. Like, hopefully we all have enough self-awareness to know our hang-ups, our struggles, our weaknesses. And so knowing this, do you choose an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-present, perfect God, or do we choose ourselves? Seems like a no-brainer. Seems like an easy answer. I think we all can figure it out in our heads, but actually doing it is hard. Actually doing it is challenging. Very few of us can actually do it. If any of us, we can't. It's hard. But the thing that we have to ask ourselves is, what if God does know best? What if God can use difficult situations? What if God can take uncomfortable circumstances? And what if we get to the point where we're at the end of our rope, which is right where his begins? What if we get to the spot where we're stop depending on ourselves and for a moment, for a brief moment, put our trust in him? What if God actually allows us to go through difficult situations, not because he hates us, not because he's mad at us, but what if he wants us to fully depend on who he is so that we can live the full life he's designed us for? What if that's what we're trying to do? What if that's what he's trying to get? Because imagine in your life, imagine how your life would be different if every single day, rather than primarily relying and trusting on your own personality, your own intuition, your own thoughts, we trusted and relied on God. It's a scary thing. I wish I could tell you it's the easiest thing, because what that does is it puts us in a vulnerable place. It puts us in a vulnerable place, but what I can see in my life, and what Paul's about to learn, is that God has a pretty good track record. He has a pretty good record, and this is the part that Paul learns in 2 Corinthians 1, verse 10. It says this. It says, God has saved us. He's talking to others. He goes, yes, we were going through hard times. We were going through an uncomfortable situation. We were going through something difficult. But God saved us from deadly dangers. And, I love this part, he will continue to do it. He will continue to do it. We have put our hope in him. He will continue to save us. Paul understands something. He says, listen, he has saved us once. He will do it again, and he is going to keep on doing it. What Paul understands is that we have a God who rescues. We have a God who has rescued Paul many times. And I think the problem when we look at this word rescue is sometimes I think we have a misconception of that word. I think a lot of us look at the word rescue, and what we think that means is for us to be taken out of a situation. We pray for God to take us out of circumstances. And maybe you've prayed that prayer like, God, take me out of this relationship. God, take me away from this struggle. God, take me away from this infertility. God, take me away from the pain. God, just pull it away from me. Take me out of this relationship. God, can you rescue me, please? We've all probably prayed those things. And the thing is, we're not the only ones who ever prayed those. If you read the scriptures, a man named King David prayed a similar prayer. A man named Jesus before he went to the cross and died, prayed, God, if there's another way, do it. And sometimes we think what rescue is. Sometimes we think being rescued by God means that we are going to be taken out of a situation. But what if being rescued by God means not necessarily only being pulled away from a situation, but given the strength to go through it? What if the way God rescues us is giving you the strength to handle some of life's hardest circumstances and situations? You see, I've seen God over and over again remove people from horrible situations, take things away, but I've also seen God give people incredible strength, incredible courage, and incredible just patience to go through some of life's most trying times. What if that's the idea of rescue? And regardless of the type of rescue, what Paul learns and what Paul understood, it is his pain that he had somebody who cared about him. He trusted so much in God that he knew that no matter what happens, he wasn't going to walk through life alone. He would continue to rescue him in the future. And you see, I think that's a truth that every one of us can hold on to today. That whatever horrible things, whatever situations, whatever trying circumstances, whatever you may be battling through now, whatever that experience is, you can trust that there is a God who is faithful. There is a God who loves you. There is a God who cares deeply about the things that you care about, so much so that he says you don't have to walk through it alone. And you see, in this situation that Paul was in, he trusted that God would have his hand over his life and that God would continue to rescue him over and over again, whether it was by taking him out of a situation or giving him the strength to power through a situation. And you see, the thing that I love about Paul is not only did he rest in that fact, not only did he trust in God, not only did he believe that God would rescue him, is that Paul had understood the power of something else. He understood the power of a prayer. And in 2 Corinthians 1:11, he finishes this section by saying this. He says, you must help us. He's writing to a group of people. He says, you must help us. How can you help? It's not by taking us out of a situation. It's not by coming and, saving the day and knocking everything over. He says, you can help us. Help us by praying for us. Then many people will give thanks because of what will happen to us. He believes so deeply that if other people are praying, if other people are interceding for him, something's going to happen. And it says they will thank God for his kindness to us and answer to the prayers of many. You see, Paul had this deep understanding, not only of trust, not only of rescue, but finally of prayer. Paul understood that the word help, the idea that help was not in the form of a physical help, was not in the form of just a rescue or taken away. It was in the form of prayers. And sometimes, I know if you're like me, the idea of prayer is tricky. And a lot of times we treat prayer like it's a last resort. Like, well, all we can do now is pray. It's like prayer's like the last kid picked for dodgeball. Like, well, that's all we got left. But what if we started with prayer? What if we took that as our first step? You see, I believe Paul is laying this roadmap out. We're saying, listen, prayer changes things. Prayer changes the relationship. Prayer changes circumstances. Prayer is a powerful thing. And this is an incredible picture that Paul paints of prayer. He says, like, when somebody is struggling, when people are going through difficult times, it is the best support in the world. Not only to come alongside of them, but to encourage them and to link arms in prayer. Because it's through our prayers that God listens. It's through our prayers that God responds. And it's through our prayers that God can rescue us. You see, I love this picture that Paul paints because he lays it out for me in 3 simple steps. He reminds us that we need to try to trust. That when we're in these situations, we can try and trust. Try to remember to not depend on ourselves, but to fully depend on him. And then we have to remember that he also rescues. And sometimes it's not the rescue that you and I think. It's not the taken out of a situation, but sometimes it's the strength to go through a situation. And then the final thing he reminds us to do is to partner together in prayer. The prayers of one another are powerful. The prayers that you can pray are powerful. You don't have to have a microphone or know every verse in the Bible to pray. It can be a simple thing. And when we go through these defining moments in life, when you go through these circumstances or situations and you're struggling to figure out what am I supposed to do, it would be easy to pull away from God. It would be easy to say, God, I'm going to try to sort this out on my own. But what I believe Paul lays the roadmap for us to do is to let defining moments draw us closer to our Creator. Because what if in these moments, what if in our time together, where instead of pulling away from God, we actually gave him the chance, and we actually tried to grow closer to God? You see, as we wrap up today, we're going to do something in just a few minutes. The band's going to come out, and they're going to lead us in a song. And as they do, we're going to give you guys an opportunity to do something. And you see, the thing I love about Kensington, the thing that drew me to Kensington 5 years ago, was that we weren't afraid to ask questions. And I think there's times in here, like Andrew said, how many times I ask God, why? And maybe for some of you, you're in that spot today, where you're like, listen, all this stuff is nice. Paul seems like a great guy, but I just have some stuff that I need to work out with God. I need 5 minutes with God where I can let him know how I feel. I believe this is a safe place to do that. And so as Ryan and the team is out here, they're going to play a song, and across the stage, we have different cards up here. Or on your seats, we have cards. And what I would love for you to do is to take the next few minutes as they're singing the song and as you begin to sing with them. If you have a question that you wanted to ask God, if you have an issue in your life where you would love the support of a prayer from somebody else, take a moment and engage your heart with God in that. Take a moment to write that down. Take a moment to sit there and really fully ask God whatever it is on your heart. Or to fully lay down whatever it is that's wrangling you up, that's bothering you, and that maybe keeps you up at night. And so I'm going to pray for us. The band's going to lead us. And in those moments, maybe it's your time to write something down that's been on your heart. Would you pray with me? God, thank you for today. Thank you for this time together. Thank you for the story of Paul. Thank you for his obedience and his life that actually shows us a way that we can take our moments in life that are challenging, that are hard, that maybe we don't understand, and can allow us to reflect on who you are, God. I pray for people in here that may be walking through a difficult circumstance or a moment where they feel challenged or where they're at a crossroads. I pray that your hand be on their life and they can sense you in this time. We thank you and we love you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So as Bryce and Ryan lead us in this song, I would love for you to take a moment, take the card with you, and maybe write down a question or a prayer, and then Ryan will show us what to do from there. Thank you.
Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the mountain I drink from. Oh,
time, I just want to encourage you, if you have a card that you filled out, feel free to bring it up to the front. There's some cards here. And I just want to encourage you, too, pick up someone else's card so you can pray for that. And just as a body, as a family, we can just be interceding and praying for each other with the different questions we have and the breakthrough that we're believing God to give us. So as we sing this next bridge, I encourage you to come forward and go ahead and do that. Bring your cards to the front and then take someone else's, and we'll sing this out. You're never gonna let me down. 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 Oh, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. No, no, no. You're never gonna let me down. Oh, you're never gonna let me down. You are good. Oh, you are good. You good. Oh, you are good. You good. Oh, you are good. You're so good. Oh, you are good. So good. Oh, you are good. You're good. So good. So good. Oh, yes, you are good. So good. Oh, you are good. So good. Oh.
So I'm gonna say two quick things before we wrap up. First one is, wasn't that message incredible? Didn't he do such a phenomenal job? That's such a good, so powerful. So good. And if you're anything like me, some of you might be introverted. You're like, I don't know that I want to walk up in front of everybody and do something, which is totally okay. I get that. I'm probably with you. But here's what I would say to you. There's something about having like a memento of a moment when you've made a decision. And so for some of you, you may need to take that little card home and you put it up somewhere and you just remind yourself of what it is that you're taking the next step in. Because I think whenever you go to take a next step, having something along with you is so important. To do that. And then shifting gears just a little bit, I wanted to let you know that today what we're doing is we're going to be having a parent meeting. We sent out an email just to let everybody know, but if you were a parent of a K-Kids or a middle school student or a high school student, we're going to take about 10 minutes and just circle up together and kind of talk to you a little bit about what we're doing and where we're going and what family ministries looks like. And the great thing is the volunteers back there already know, so your kids are taken care of, middle school students taken care of. They're not going to burn the place down. You'll be fine, all right? You'll be fine. But we'd love for you just to take about 10 minutes. And so if you are a parent, we'd ask you to stay in the room and just kind of make your way up into these first 3 or 4 or 5 rows right here so that we can give you some important information moving forward. And the last thing is next week we continue our series called Defining Moments. I'm telling you, it's going to be an amazing week to invite somebody to church. What we're talking about is applicable to every single one of us, so we'd love for you to be here for that next week. Again, thanks so much for being here. If you're a parent, stay around for a couple of minutes, and we'll hop in here in about 5 minutes to the parent meeting. Thanks so much. So much for watching online. We're so thankful that you're part of this growing community of people who are engaging with us in your home or in a coffee shop, wherever you're watching that from today. And then I want to remind you again, next week we're continuing our series called Defining Moments. And what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be looking at the story of one of my good friends, Danny Cox. And we're going to be looking at how through his life, through his journey, he experienced an amazing thing through parenting and adoption. And so we'd love for you to join us next week as we continue the series. You can watch us online, or if you're in the northern Michigan area, we'd love to invite you to our campus. campus here in Traverse City. It's an amazing experience online, but we think it's even more amazing experience here live. So we'd love for you to do that. Or if you're in the Metro Detroit area, we have campuses all over Metro Detroit that you can choose from, or in Orlando, Florida as well if you're down south. So again, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you right back here next week.